You can all see that new slide? Yep, excellent, excellent. Well, I sort of found this is AI helped me find a picture. I said, find me a picture of, you know, lots of people sit in an exam in a university setting, and this is what they showed. And of course, I mean, I'm certainly of an age to remember that, not only sitting at that desk, but also being the person at the front supervising that, handing out extra paper, making sure people went to the toilet, and etc., all of those things. Of course, some of the things to do with some of the issues with assessment have always been there with the face-to-face, but they're there even more, we find, with the digital and online assessment. And I've broken these into two sorts to talk about the academic problems, especially the quality assurance problems of that alignment. Does the assessment, whatever it might be, actually measure the intended learning outcomes for that module, and do they build towards that program? And the opportunity. And I'm sure we've all got horror stories, or sometimes quite humorous stories of attempts to cheat in assessments. But whatever we do, whatever type of assessments we manage and set up, there's always got to be that chance that somebody thinks to cheat. My long experience in doing this tells me that 99% of students don't want to cheat. But as soon as you put that online and the opportunities for them to use the internet, to use a second computer to do something while they're locked in on another computer, the opportunities expand. And the validity of the assessment as well. And that's what typically our internal quality assurance mechanisms seek to ensure, not just the achievement or the alignment with the intended learning outcomes, but the right level. If this is at a master's degree level, or is it at a bachelor's degree level, or is it at some level different to that? Is this an appropriate level test, exam, assignment for this? So the validity in that way. And then when we introduce online, we get a whole different set of problems, new problems, which, the technology, as in that picture, is limited. But of course, if we're using online assessment, especially in an asynchronous online mode, we're expecting the students to do the assessment. Typically these days it's assignments, could be timed exams, unseen exams, but the technology they have available at their end needs to be enough. The connection may need to be there for the entire length of the exam, or they just need the connection to submit an assignment and submit it through some sort of mechanism. Typically, I use the brand name Turnitin, but there are a number of other mechanisms to check for similarities with text from elsewhere. They also said that, suggested there were ways they could detect that if AI had been used. But of course, the advent 2 years ago of general release of ChatGPT and many other AIs mean that we've got to take that into consideration. There's practical problems there with how do we set assignments that AI can't do, or how do we test things and we're not just testing someone's ability to manipulate the AI, unless that's exactly what we're testing, unless it's the AI skills we're testing, and then we can use that. But in something where we don't anticipate it, and then of course say that one of the reasons for entering into the digital education area is, you know, an international audience, perhaps an expatriate audience or an international cohort of learners, and they may be in different time zones at different times. Executive education is particularly prone to this because people can travel for their work and be in different time zones at different stages in their studies because of where work has sent them. So there's all those issues to overcome. To help me here to structure some of the comments, I've gotten to sort of say the first or mention the first takeaway here. I looked at, I like these research papers that synthesize the existing research in a particular area. And here's one, a review of online assessment, 2023, so not totally up to date, but they were looking at online assessment in MOOCs, in courses generally, and I think a lot of them were asynchronous courses, but they broke the assessment types down into 4 different types, and you can see there on the screen, you know, the one that many go for is the automated, the multiple choice quiz. It's more than that, of course. Automated assessment in quizzes can be far more varied than a multiple choice question. You know, they can be open answer questions that can be, the words can be recognized. They can be different types of questions, as I'm using on the Menti, different ways of collecting the responses, and the can be programmed to automatically mark those. And I think that has some huge benefits for academics, particularly once they're set up. I not say a lot more about that because this is the exercise I want to involve you all in very shortly, is to think about some of these different types of assessment, the automated, the peer assessment, perhaps. And this is something I've researched in the past, but peer assessment, we saw that in some early MOOCs, some early pioneers in the online courses, where instead of the tutor offering feedback, you put, because it was asynchronous and across different time zones, you put something into the discussion and you were asked to critique or comment on others' submissions, and they would critique or comment on yours. Now, very difficult to achieve a sort of summative assessment or marks in that, but again, it's a mechanism of engagement, and it's a mechanism for, as it says on the screen there, promoting higher level cognitive skills. So those things that we expect at the, you know, the top of a bachelor's degree or in a master's degree or even a PhD, which can be done online in some places. What there's no substitute for is, of course, the academic expert and the expert feedback. Someone actually reads your work and comments on it against a rubric, perhaps, against what their expectations are from the intended learning outcomes. And some even ask for self-assessment, and you think, well, of course, that's brilliant. I'd give myself top marks. But self-assessment, aiding those reflective skills, and very often those things are part of study. You know, the reflective skills, what don't I know, so it's part of that sort of higher level analysis and cognitive skills that we expect graduates to have. This is a quote from the paper itself. The paper's linked in the sources documentation, and yes, I had a request to send the documentation, and I will on email, because the Google Classroom doesn't isn't consistent with the institutional email, but I will send that on email. But on this link, it says, well, actually what is found is the most effective way of doing assessment, and this is, against cries of horror from academics, is to do lots of different assessments, combine them, some automated, some formative, some peer, some teacher, some even self. Combine these different things, and there's huge advantages to that. Again, I'm not going to rehearse all of those because that's the work I want you to do, but to actually have these. And if you think as a researcher, looking at assessment, does this learner have they actually met the intended learning outcomes? Well, you've got lots of different bits of evidence to suggest that, rather than one final examination or defense of a thesis or whatever it might be. And that's something that's a cultural thing, that the opportunities digital give us, and the need to design these different engagement tools in for assessment mean that digital really upset some more traditional thinkers in this area.